It's coming up to 10 minutes to the hour here on Paris Live PM, and we're coming towards the end of our program here today. But first, before we go, we're going to take a look at US President Donald Trump's address to both houses of Congress last night. And I'm joined in the studio today by Gerald Olivier, who's an author, journalist, and political strategist. Gerald, great to have you back on the program today.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Well, let's have a little, I'm just going to do a little paraphrasing here, a little excerpt from this new chapter of American greatness. Donald Trump said last night, "Dying industries will come roaring back to life. Heroic veterans will get the care they so desperately need. Our military will be given the resources its brave warriors so richly deserve," and so on and so forth. Crumbling infrastructure will be replaced with new roads, bridges, tunnels. Now, these were great words. This was probably the most presidential of the speeches that he has made since the 5 weeks that he took power. Now, above all else, he has made a promise to the American people. First and foremost, what do you think his speech was like last night?
Oh, I thought it was a great speech. To be honest, I thought it was his best presidential speech because he was presidential. If you remember the inaugural speech was actually very dark.
It was very dark.
American
exactly.
Carnage. It was on one of those cloudy, rainy days, and the speech matched the sky. Exactly. I had the same reaction to it. It was a pretty strange feeling. Last night, it was his first address to Congress, and there was some protocol about it. Everything went really well. Congress was very polite to him. He was fairly polite to Congress, and he never veered off subject. He never went on in one of those improvisation. He stuck to the text and the teleprompter.
But he never got into the nitty-gritty.
But he never got specific. Exactly. That was the clever part of it. However, it was an upbeat speech. Remember, it started with something like a new chapter in, or a new beginning in American greatness. That was the main sentence at the start.
Indeed, he's staying very much on what would you say, on the line that he pulled all throughout the actual campaign. Make America great again, American greatness, great. Simple messages to the masses.
Absolutely.
Do you think that what came out of his speech last night will actually be able to rally the Democrats behind him as a president?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Certainly not. And we can get that a little later. But his concern right now is also to rally Republicans.
Indeed.
Because
such as the John McCain's of this world.
The John McCain, the Lindsey Graham, and the Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan being Speaker of the House and one of the leader of the deficit reduction wing of the Republican Party. Basically, beyond this speech, Trump is talking about this $1 trillion infrastructure investment, which was going to add up tremendous amount to the already huge American debt. He's also talking about tax cuts for individuals, families, and businesses that could lower the state's tax revenues, meaning he's talking about not deficit reduction, but on the contrary, increasing on the deficit. On March 15th, there's the number one deadline. The U.S. will reach one of those debt ceilings. They'll have to agree to either raise the ceiling or go into a default, at least for a while.
Now, as I was talking to you before you came on the program there, we can see in the wake of Trump's speech last night that the stock markets opened up about, I don't know, an hour ago in our time, all up on the back of Trump's speech. However, other figures came out saying that American inflation is at its highest, I think, in 4 years. Which swing and which roundabout are we meant to say is pro or against what Trump is actually saying here?
But actually, the Trump market, the stock market, is extremely important for Trump.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's going to be the number one barometer, or is he successful or not? As you know, the job market is just not going to turn around overnight. Even though he's saying Fords and General Motors and all those big guys are coming back and building new factories and starting new jobs, you're not going to see any real difference until a couple of years. So the midterm elections coming in 2018 will be the number one landmark. And until then, the market will be the barometer of is he doing well or is he not.
Now, Trump, let's just have a look back there. I mean, we'll have to keep our finger on the pulse of the markets and exactly what is happening now over the next 2 years, as you said, before the midterms. But for a candidate who sold himself as a master deal maker, and which he even alluded to in his speech last night, Trump has shown little inclination to get deeply involved into the nitty-gritty, as I mentioned at the beginning of our talk today. into the nitty-gritty of negotiating that defines the legislative process that he has actually got to act upon. Do you think that a leopard can change his spots, or that this leopard can change his spots?
No, he never does, and he never did. He is the guy who puts his signature at the bottom of the document, but he doesn't really draft the document. If you want to understand Donald Trump, you do have to go back and read his first book, The Art of the Deal, back in 1987. Everything is there about him, how he sees the world, how he does things. And in terms of business, he can pick up the phone. He can talk to anyone. That's all he does all the time. But he's not going to go down into the nitty-gritty of things, as you say. He relies on negotiators. He relies on the best and the brightest, maybe, or the smartest people around.
Which yet again has yet to be defined. How can you define the best and smartest?
They're supposed to be leading his administration today. We'll see about that. But the point is, going back to last night's speech, it was extremely important that he set himself finally as president. He managed to do that. He set some goals. Some of them are very utopian. His whole thing about healthcare is going to be very hard to actually implement, even harder than Obamacare.
Well, he was ridiculed by one of his adversaries, Bernie Sanders, by saying, well, Bernie Sanders himself was on these education committees. He was on the board of these, where hours and hours and hours were spent on it, and you actually see him bursting out laughing at what Trump saying, well, it's a bit of a complicated issue. Of course it is. But you've said there that Trump has given Republicans kind of what they want now, somebody presidential, somebody who's really kind of fitting now into the shoes. But how long will he remain presidential? Like days, weeks, months, or just a tweet away before he goes back to his old self?
Or a vote away. A vote away in the Senate. In the Senate, the Republicans have a 3-vote majority. So you can count John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and then anyone else. If these 3 default on anything, be it military investment, he asked last night for a 10% increase in the defense budget. Indeed, not everyone's going to agree to it. John McCain thinks it's not enough. So he is 3 votes away from not having a majority in the Senate, and therefore having any one of his proposals be defeated by the Congress, which would be a major setback. That's why I say, before reaching to Democrats, he has to reach Republicans and make sure he has a united House behind him.
Mm-hmm. Now, also, you touched there upon that proposed 10% increase in the military budget, but let's also look at foreign policy. The Trump administration is also reviewing its participation in the UN Human Rights Council, which has been meeting in Geneva over the past few days. And this is with an eye to reforming and creating a balanced agenda that ends at what they call the forum's obsession with Israel. Now, the Trump administration actually have a point here, that the UN Human Rights Council is obsessed with Israel?
Maybe not. But remember what Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics is local. That phrase and that issue is directed to the American people. The UN is not very popular with the US electorate, especially the General Assembly. The Human Rights Council, even less. Remember who actually sits on this council: China, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, Iraq, other countries that do not really have a spotless human rights records. And so why should Americans take lessons from these people? Israel is the number 1 US ally. There will always be behind Israel, especially a Trump administration. So they're just putting the usual pressure. Obama was very nice to the UN. He was very much of a multilateralist. Trump is not. We're in the era of America first. And if the UN is not willing to go along with that, so be it for them. They'll do without them.
So, I mean, if the US does pull out of the Human Rights Council, this will be a further act that will embolden Likud strategy of continuing settlements in the West Bank, despite like the Israeli Supreme Court, for example, ruling against it. Now, what exactly do you think that Trump has actually thought these things through? He has met with Netanyahu. Does he know?
They did last week. He came about 10 days ago. I assume they discussed it. Obviously, Barack Obama was extremely critical of the Israeli settlement policy.
Well,
and he let it be known. Trump is not. However, Trump doesn't want to give Israel, especially Netanyahu, a blank check. And that's probably what they talked about last week. So with those old announcements of the new settlements that were allowed just earlier in January and February, there was probably some reason for Trump to try and tell Netanyahu, don't push your luck. Don't take it too far. Even though they both agree on one fundamental issue, is that the settlements are not the reason why we don't have peace in the Middle East. There are reasons behind that. And until everyone's willing to go looking into those specific reasons, nothing will happen there. He's just telling the Israelis, I'm with you, just don't push it too far.
Now, Gerald, very briefly, but I want to go into something like of a more cerebral way of looking at the phenomenon that is the Trump administration, and also the phenomenon of people accepting misinformation as truths and false truths. We have alternative facts. We're now living in this post-truth world. Now, look at what happened to Hillary Clinton. Despite not being particularly affable to the electorate, what do the US Democrats have to learn from the fact that alt facts now, people are just going to accept them? They don't give a damn if the truth is being said there. It's the way they have to be delivered. What do you think the Democrats have to do to bounce back against, let's say, the Steve Bannons and the rhetoric that comes out of the Trump administration?
Oh, it's very simple. They have to find what I would describe as a birther issue. Remember the birth certificate, Obama's birth certificate?
Indeed.
It was one of the things that got the Tea Party going. They just could not accept the legitimacy of Barack Obama's election, and they grabbed on something, however small, tiny, hard to catch it was, and they just used it and used it again and twisted it in every possible way so as to get their point across. The Democrats thought they had something like this with the Russian connection. It may turn out that it's actually not the case. It may be the women's issue. It may be the healthcare issue, but they have to define that issue and then rally around it.
Find something that will put a boil on the backside of the administration. Okay, Gerald Olivier, thank you very much for being on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.